What is spine safe or spine smart movement when it comes to osteoporosis? I'm Alison Crouch from the Move Smart Method for Osteoporosis, and this was a great question I got from somebody recently, and I thought we would break it down. So, first off, I prefer the term spine smart to spine safe, although I do use both of them, because I think as soon as we start using the word safe, it elicits this feeling of, well, then everything else is dangerous. And I don't love the idea that we're living in a state of fear and feeling fragile and feeling like we're at risk. I like the term spine smart because it implies that we're making good choices and that we are being thoughtful about how we're moving our bodies, but we're not doing it from a place of fear and paralysis. Excuse me. So many people have heard that they're never supposed to bend their spines with osteoporosis, that they're never allowed to twist or rotate with osteoporosis, never allowed to side bend. And so I want to be super clear that there are actually some more nuanced elements to this idea of spine smart, safe motion. So according to Osteoporosis Canada, we want to limit, but not eliminate, flexion, which is forward bending of the spine, rotation or twisting, and side bending, and what are called compound movements, which is where you might flex and turn at the same time. So we want to limit, not eliminate those motions under particular circumstances. So what are those circumstances? We want to avoid fast, forceful, weighted, end range motion, and sustained motion is also kind of in that list. So what do those things mean? Well, fast is pretty obvious. And why do we want to limit fast motion? Because it's hard to control your motion when you're going really quickly in those directions. So what would examples be of a fast flexion? Might be like rapid sit-ups, right? That's going into flexion, curving your spine quickly. Sit-ups also happen to be forceful, usually, because you're really working at it. And they're weighted with your own body weight. They're typically not end range unless you're doing like a full roll forward, like in Pilates, where you're rolling all the way forward or you're rolling all the way down. Those would not tend to be fast and forceful though. So fast and forceful motions, make it hard to control whether you are in fact going to end range, and they can end up putting more pressure on the fronts and the sides of your vertebrae. So why does that matter? Because the fronts of our vertebrae tend to be where we're more vulnerable to fracture. So we want compression. This is where some of this stuff gets complicated. We want compression in the sense of we want to do exercises that stimulate our bone cells by adding this compressive load that makes them go, oh, wow, that was more load than I anticipated. We should bring in some more bone cells in order to be able to sustain that load. So those things come from things like jumping, hopping, skipping, heel dropping, brisk walking, quick stair climbing, dancing, right? Those things create compression in short, quick bursts of compression. When we're talking about something that is a fast, and they tend to be where your spine is long and tall, right? When we are looking at a fast flexion or a fast rotation, those tend to be positions in which there's more pressure being put on the fronts of the vertebrae, and that kind of compression could possibly, over time, contribute to more vulnerability to fracture. Doing it once, probably not an issue. Doing it repeatedly over time could increase the amount of load that the fronts, particularly of your vertebrae, are getting in a way that might not be helpful for you. And fast, forceful movements make it harder to assess how you're moving. Weighted motion is something else that we want to limit when it comes to flexion, rotation, and side bending. So why would that be? Well, because then we have more than your body weight. We have an increased amount of load on the fronts of the vertebrae and the sides of the vertebrae where we might be more prone to fracture. So that might be rolling down with big bags of groceries, right? So now you're in flexion with extra weight. So you're putting more weight on the fronts of your vertebrae. Where you are twisting to the side, holding a weight. So in an exercise context, holding a medicine ball, right? Where you have extra weight and you're twisting. So if you're twisting and you're maintaining the length in your spine, that might be okay. But if you also end up being fast, forceful, going to end range, if you end up dipping down on that side, now we're talking about a combination of rotation and side bending, and maybe even a little bit of flexion. So that's a compound motion. So we want to kind of limit that. And then end range. End range is where you are forcing yourself past, going to or past the place where you can go with control. So this is where we really want to think about not feeling like rigid robots. So should we never, ever, 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 ever flex our spines? No, life doesn't work like that. But we want to limit end range. Well, end range is different for everybody. And we want to, this is a perfectly reasonable way to curve your spine. But do I want to roll all the way down? I limit that. I do it sometimes. I'm very flexible. I'm very strong. This movement thing is my full-time job, but I don't do it very often. Like in a yoga seated forward fold. For most people, that's going to end range. That's more pressure on the fronts of the spine than it would be if you did just a small roll forward of your spine. In terms of rotation, we want to maintain our ability to rotate. For those of you who've seen my free masterclass or you've seen me talk about this before, my favorite example is now getting outdated because of car cameras. But if you drive a car, you need to be able to rotate enough to check your blind spot. You need to be able to see behind you when you're backing up. And if we're going to make sure that this is not your end range twist, can't go any farther, have to kind of force to get there, then we have to maintain a practice of controlled less than end range rotation in kind of everyday practice, everyday life, in your exercise, in your yoga, in your Pilates class. So if I twist all the way one time, again, not really an issue. And I'm going to use that twist all the way to then go, okay, well, if this is as far as I can go with my muscles, I'm going to back it up. I back it up to about 70%. And I maintain my capacity for rotation. I maintain my capacity for side bending, not going all the way, going slowly and with control, being really mindful of the movement. But I want to maintain those ranges of motion. If you are a super flexible person who used to do a lot of flexion, so for those of you who are familiar with it, Pilates is full of flexion and I loved all of it. I don't do that very often anymore. And there's some of them I don't do at all anymore because they just don't make sense. It's not a worthwhile trade-off for me in terms of risk versus reward. And that's how I maintain my spine safe, spine smart approach to my Pilates practice. So I feel like I've rambled a little bit in this one. I don't have a script. So spine smart rather than spine safe so that we avoid feeling frozen and fearful. Thinking about the ranges of motion, the shifts and the positions that we're trying to limit but not eliminate because life. Flexion is forward bending, rotation or twisting, and side bending, and movements that combine them like rolling down to get something heavy out of the car and then twisting to put it on the ground beside you, right? That would be flexion and rotation combined. So we're limiting those motions. We are limiting them when they are fast, when they are forceful, when they are weighted, when they are end range, or where they're sustained. So like if you're doing a lying down yoga twist where you're taking your knee all the way to the floor and staying there for 5 minutes. Maybe we don't do that, but you could bolster your leg so that you twist part way, so that you're less than your end range, and then you could hang out there. Why are we limiting those things? Because we want to make sure that we are not repeatedly, as a movement pattern, overloading particularly the fronts of our vertebrae in ways that put extra pressure on the fronts of the vertebrae, because that's the part that's most vulnerable to fractures. Side note, when we talk about not bending forward, we're really specifically talking about not bending your spine all the way forward, but we love bending at your hips. This is how we get through the world, right? This is how you load the dishwasher. This is how you scrape the plates into the garbage. This is how you get the things out of the car. How you deal with your cat or your dog or your grandchildren is you work on your hip hinging. I'll include a link down below, and maybe if I get it together, I'll be able to have a link up above for a video that shows you more about hip hinging. Got questions? Pop them in down below. Don't forget to follow for more.